And Min-Young is a trilingual typography consultant and well known in the field for a very long time now.
Thank you.
Who has, among other things, worked as a type project manager for, both of the most famous Japanese type foundries, actually, FontWorks and Morisawa, and is now Studio M-, focusing on multilingual type development. Min-Young.
Thank you. Okay, it works. Hi, everyone. But just before I begin, let me just just in case you are too far away to see what's on my mug, this is my mug. I don't quite like the type on it, but anyways, thank you so much for being here on the first day, first thing in the morning. I know you guys all wanted to stay where the coffees are served, but I mean, I wanted to, but so Thomas gave me a really good introduction, so I'm gonna skip this part, but since my studio, M- is also a name of my dog, who is a CEO of my studio, so I'm just gonna have a little moment to thank him here. Thank you for making me being here. So today I wanted to talk about, let's go back to the title page. So today I wanted to talk about how Latin, Japanese, and Korean each developed and classified and engineered in a different way, because CJK has been having a lot of spotlight for the past few years, which is a great thing, but do we really want to group them all together? Like, are we really sure that it's all the same thing? So today I am going to go through some common misunderstandings on CJK type development in a questionnaire form. First question, CJK all use Chinese characters? Well, you can probably assume answer is no. It may look all same to you, and it may look like Chinese characters in a regional form, but actually we can't, as a Korean and Japanese speaker, we can't read simplified Chinese or traditional Chinese. And we can't definitely use like Japanese kanji to simplified Chinese typesetting. So we should consider it as all different scripts, although it all derived from Chinese characters. And they are all called different, Hanzi and Kanji and Hanja in Korean. So this is also very well known through Source Hand Sans project from Adobe. So you can probably go on search for some of their article. Also, the other thing is that Hangeul or Korean typesetting don't really use Hanja anymore. This is one of my book, and as you can see, there's no Hanja anywhere. It kind of started from 1990s when the computer era started. It was really hard for Korean IME to input Hanja on computers, so that was kind of the start of the end of Hanja usage. And about like 10 or 15 years ago, the Ministry of Education actually made the Hanja class mandatory, from mandatory to optional. So people from under the age of 30, they don't know how to read or write Hanja in Korea. So when you look at newspapers or news on the TV, you can see that Hanja is rarely used in Korea. So that's another one of the misunderstanding. And I want to quickly go over that. If you look at this book, you see a lot of Latin alphabets typesetted together with Hangul. I'm going to go back to that later in the slides. So the second question, CJK are all full with embox? let's see. So this is the easy all-in-one image. You can compare and contrast. So we obviously know that Latin alphabet is proportional, and Chinese and Japanese are mostly designed in an embox, meaning a square box. But Korean, they used to be like that, but around 15 years ago or so, the slightly condensed, about like 850 to 950 unit width, a monospaced form has been in trend. So many of the famous Korean fonts that we know, like Sans or Apple SD Gothic, which is Apple's system font now, is also slightly condensed monospaced font. And also, some Korean fonts are proportional too, like the ones at the two bottom, Goon Darum and Arita Buri. They are proportional. It's not really easy to create proportional Hangul font because there's like at least 2,300-ish glyphs you have to draw, and if you are designing something that's for a system font or more wider usage, you need to design 11,000 glyphs. So think about that, 11,000 glyphs with proportional width. That's not really realistic. So there aren't a lot of proportional Hangul fonts, but there still are. And while we're talking about the variety of design space in Korean fonts, I want to go over this type classification called out-of-the-box or non-square font. It is called like that because it's literally just out of the box. So around 1980s, designers started to experiment, and Ahn Sang Soo, the type designer, Ahn Sang Soo and Lee Sang-chul first tried this type classification or type style, and it was to go back to the original Hangul form when it was first created around 1443. It looks complicated, and it is proportional too, but it's actually being said that it's easier to start type designing with out-of-the-box font than these fitted into the box form because they all share the same components, so it's easier to create. And also, Japanese fonts are mostly designed full width monospaced, but there is a way to make it look like proportional by using tsume feature, which is also known as proportional metrics. So kanji, the Chinese characters used in Japan, uses full embox design space, but hiragana and katakana, we just call it kana overall, actually have proportional nature. So back in the day, before the movable type re-entered to Japan, I'm going to go back to that re-enter part later in the slide. So Japanese was written vertically in a continuous form, so it had a variety of width in kana's form. But when they re-imported the movable type from Netherlands, they also imported Chinese characters from Shanghai, which was designed in embox. So that's when they started to fit hiragana and katakana into the embox form. And so even though it looks quite okay, with some pairs, like written here, there comes a little bit of awkward spacing in between, so that's when the proportional metrics come handy. This is an OpenType feature called PALT, and realistically speaking, if you're creating a Japanese font or a multiscript font with Japanese inside, you need to have PALT data to have reliable kana in the font. By the way, I wrote about these articles on Google Fonts Knowledge, so you can go look at it in detail more. And also, one of my type swamp friend, Nat Macaulay, is going to be talking about embox in the next session, so stay tuned. So let's go back to how movable type got to Japan and Korea. I know, like, the history thing is not something you want to hear in the morning, but I'm going to try my best to make it as entertaining as possible. So as you all know, Gutenberg invented movable type around mid-1400s, blah, blah, blah. This is the first thing you learn on Typography 101. But what we mostly don't really know is that actually the very first trial of movable type was done in China, Song Dynasty back then, around 1040s with the porcelain type, and they printed paper money with it. So that's the first similar technology to movable type ever. And also around mid-1300s, in Korea, they invented their own copper movable type. You can actually see the existing book called Chikji at the Bibliothèque Nationale de France. Sorry for my awful French. I tried. They tried their best to preserve their technology, but it was very complicated to preserve both in systematically and material-wise. So it kind of faded away until Gutenberg's movable type got imported to Korea around 1800s by French missionaries. Japan had kind of a similar path at first. Around 1500s, they imported Gutenberg's movable type through Portuguese missionaries, but less than 100 years later, both missionaries and movable type was banned from Japan because of the harsh seclusion policy, because they were both seen as the foreign intruder. And then not until 1800s they lived without movable type. And then Motogi Shozo, a very famous person in Japan, imported Gutenberg's movable type, again, re-imported it again through Dutch trading ships, because Netherlands was the only country that was allowed to trade with Japan, even during the seclusion policy. So Motogi Shozo was a translator, Dutch translator. I mean, he is Japanese, but he was a Dutch-Japanese translator. And he saw this movable type technology and then thought, oh, we should have that in Japan. So he imported and then started printing dictionaries. So at this point, we can kind of see that usually movable type moves around with religion. The first earliest books that was printed with movable type was Bible, and when it gets imported to other countries, it's usually with the missionaries. But because Japan's re-import was done through a translator, I believe that this is my theory, that is why Japanese type culture and typography is very educational. I'm going to go into that in the next slide. So for example, there is a lot of type classification that's specific for educational usage in Japan. So Gakusan form, which means educational form, is a type classification that's for textbooks and school usage, for the kids to learn the correct letter form easily. So this is how we write, but usually fonts have a different form that's on the top. So Gakusan form is not quite, how should I put this, not famous in a way because it's not being used in a normal books, but it is very important for the kids at the school to learn the correct letter forms. And Hitsujun font, it means stroke order, is also a type classification that is used at probably only elementary school. So it shows each one strokes one by one so that kids learn the correct stroke order to write hiragana, katakana, Arabic numerals, and also like about approximately 1,000 kanjis that are mandatory to learn at elementary school. By the way, there are several different ways to categorize kanji in Japanese fonts, and you can also read that on Google Fonts blog. It's different from Google Fonts Knowledge. The search word is Google Fonts and Min Young Kim with the hyphen in between Min and Young. There's the first one pops up is the one. Thank you, Google Fonts, by the way. So the next is UD font. Some of you might be familiar with this. So UD font is universal font and is also one of the unique type classification I believe only exists in Japan for now, and also started in Japan. So this movement started from a type foundry called Iwata. It was such a big hit because it was easy for the clients to understand, like, oh, it's universal, it's high legibility, so there's the answer, we can just use that. So other foundries also started to make it and have become one of the major type classification in Japan. You can also find some of it on Google Fonts too. So basically, UD font is meant to have high legibility. Foundries do legibility tests with universities too, but as a professional, I believe that there is still a lot of room to define UD fonts. For example, like what kind of use scenes are these fonts have high legibility? Because signage system or long texts or even long texts with a lot of numerals, they all have different standards for high legibility. Or what specific low vision are they trying to support? Is it tunnel vision or dyslexia? Sophie Bayer talked about low vision and legibility in the last ATypI conference, and you can watch that on YouTube. It's amazing. Please go and look at them too. So one of my favorite UD fonts in Japan is UD Digital Kyokashotai. One of the examples is up there. So this is designed by TypeBank, which is a part of Morisawa now. And this UD Digital Kyokasho type actually focuses on dyslexia. And they did a lot of very deep research with the professionals, and it's being used a lot on textbooks or some school supplies and so on. It's available as a system font on Windows OS. I'm not a Windows user, so I can't use it. But so I'm not here to introduce certain typefaces, so I'm not going to go into that too detail. So the second question was long. There's the third question. CJK all share the same punctuation and typesetting rules? You can guess the answer is no. So although CJK do have common punctuations, Japanese uses full width Asian style, let's say, punctuation, like the ones that are colored on the top. Also, Chinese uses the same punctuation, but in traditional Chinese, these punctuations are positioned differently. They are positioned in the center, which is completely different from how simplified Chinese and Japanese uses it. And also in Korean, while we do use some of the Asian style punctuations, especially when we're vertically writing, mainly we use Latin style punctuations like commas and periods and quotation marks. And also, in Korean typesetting, there are word spacing rules, very much like Latin alphabet. But the width of the default space glyph is different. It's being said that about 30 to 35% of Hangul glyph is the best space width in Korean font, which is much wider than Latin alphabet. So if you're designing a Korean font and then use Latin style space width, it's going to be very hard to read when you typeset. And even though Korean uses the same punctuation as Latin, the position and sometimes even design has to be different. As you can see here, quotation marks and semicolon, it's, when it's in the Latin style, it's too low for Korean. So we want it a little bit higher. So some of the Korean fonts nowadays actually have both versions, the Korean version of the punctuation and Latin version of the punctuation. Sometimes it's only the position difference, and sometimes the design also changes. And type designers use language tag to make it interchangeable. So if you set the paragraph's language to Korean, it automatically just shows the Korean version of the punctuation. And if it's set as English, then it shows the Latin version. It's a very smart way to solve the issue. And so Japan has a lot of, still uses a lot of vertical writing. CJK all do use vertical writing, but the usage rate is pretty different. In Korea, there aren't much vertical writing as much as Japan. So in Japanese fonts, they have various OpenType features to support beautiful vertical writing, such as vertical alternate glyphs, vertical kerning and proportional metrics, rotating the position of Latin and punctuation for vertical typesetting, and so on. So since Japan invented its first ever commercially usable, meaning a practically made, mass-producible phototypesetting technology by Shaken and Morisawa, the development of typeface and typography rapidly grew in Japan after that. And because of this influence, Japanese typesetting has a lot of very unique and very detailed rules and customs, much more than Latin typography, I believe. And these rules and customs were mostly built from these, the phototypesetting period. And although in Korea we don't use as much vertical writing as Japan or China, we do still need vertical typesetting support. But unfortunately, we don't, the vertical OpenType feature doesn't really work on Korean fonts. Probably it's because when the OpenType feature was first built, they weren't really expecting Hangeul to use. So some of the Korean fonts that has vertical writing support uses stylistic set to solve this solution. So if you go into stylistic set and choose a vertical writing, and it gives the Asian style punctuation that's fit for vertical writing. It's not the ideal way. The ideal way would be like if you write in vertical, it automatically shows the Asian punctuation, but it's a very creative solution the Korean type designers took. So as you know, right after the Gutenberg's movable type was imported to Korea, the war began, and Korea was colonized, so lost the opportunity to explore Hangul typesetting. So when the digital age started, their fonts and typography did not yet have a guideline or rules like Japanese fonts did. So that's why the new type classification, like the condensed monospaced, like we went through earlier, gets established, and the way to solve their typographic challenges is very creative and always changing too. partially also because of the limit of Hangeul-suited support in apps and OpenType features. So finally, this is the last question. How does the character alignment work? Ta-da! So as you know, Latin alphabet is based on baseline, but CJK does not have a baseline. Chinese and Japanese uses this sense of center of gravity, which is technically the very center of the embox. So they align their characters in the center of the box, which is easier than probably Korean. Korean uses a different kind of sense. We call it visual center line. So it is not the center of the box. Like the fonts that we're seeing here, it's more of a text usage of formal typeface. These kind of fonts have rather similar, a little bit close to the center of the box, but slightly higher. And when the design of the type becomes something like handwritten style or display fonts, then the visual center line really moves freely. Like the out-of-the-box font that we went through earlier, that one has a very high visual center line. And when you have to use multiple fonts like maybe Korean fonts and Latin fonts for Latin alphabet, it's really hard to make adjustments between those two different scripts because visual center line is not something that you can find and check even in font data. Visual center line is something when a type designer designs a font, they kind of have a set in mind and then draw it. There's no guideline or anything on the font. We, as a native speaker, we kind of guess and feel like maybe this is the kind of visual center line, but probably from a non-Korean speaking designers, it would be pretty hard to distinguish visual center line. So, because all of these differences, although we've only scanned through like the very first layer of it, in Korean we call it licking a watermelon because you can't taste it by licking a watermelon. So CJK each have different techniques and challenges on type design and engineering. And when it comes to multiscript or biscript typeface with original Latin, the problem gets even more complicated. It's not only about designing characters and putting them into the box. When it's multiscript typeface, you probably can't make everything go perfect on every region and script. But I strongly believe that if we educate ourselves enough, if we are diligent and open-minded enough to learn and understand about different scripts from our native scripts, each native script, we can find not a perfect in each and every way, but perfect balance and compromise. Thank you. Do we have some time for Q&A or?
Well,
Oh, but we're pushing, so.
yeah, we are running a bit late, partly because we started late, but that said, first question, we'll have one question, and then people can always corner you during the break and stuff. But any questions? Oop, oop, up. Roger.
Wait a second, Roger.
Do you feel like there's any success in the effort to, do you feel as though there is some success in the effort to make the Korean scripts separate from the Unicode and all that?
You mean in Korean fonts?
No, I mean, yeah, I mean just public acceptance or the world acceptance, the understanding that Korean is not the same thing. Are people getting it?
I'm gonna be frank. I don't think so, and that's why I wanted to talk about this. people do know, I think, a little bit more about Japanese, partly I think because Morisawa has been such a very big tree in the Asian region, and also probably for Chinese too, because it's such a huge country. But Korea, because it's super small, no one really thinks that we have our own rules and customs for typography. So I hope through this talk, you guys get to have a little bit more interest in how CJK have similarities but also differences. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.